Something very interesting has happened that is at once both positive and also very revealing in the Netherlands. And that is a recent change in alimony policy, alimony reform, if you will. And what has happened is that alimony requirements, which used to be 12 years with a few exceptions, have been reformed to 5 years. And the 12 years period itself was a change that took place in 1994 in the Netherlands, because prior to that it was lifelong alimony. Now we need to be clear about a few things. When we speak of alimony in a place like the Netherlands, we're generally not talking about the huge sums of money that typically are exchanged in the Anglosphere, places like the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Britain, and Canada. It's approximately an average of €1,000 a month. Nonetheless, that's not exactly chump change to everybody, and it's still a decent chunk of money all in all. And because of this alimony reform, namely changing 12 years to 5, there has been a fantastic sociological phenomenon that has taken place that we can document, observe, and use for the purposes of study. And what has happened in the month of December alone is that there has been a skyrocketing divorce rate in the Netherlands as a response to this alimony reform policy. Now, why? And the reason for this, by all accounts, and by means of our ability to observe the motives here, is because the actual reform goes into effect as of the 1st of January 2020. And this is hugely consequential. This means that if you were to file for divorce prior to that period, you would still get access to the old policy of alimony, namely 12 years as opposed to 5. And so now there has been a mad rush for the finish line, as it were, made almost entirely by women. Now, I will be posting 2 Dutch articles in Lobar, as well as a Dutch video. Depending how your Dutch is, you may or not be in luck. You could always use Google Translate for a poor translation. Nonetheless, it seems to be the case that 90% of alimony payments are made by men in the Netherlands. No surprise there. And when I say it's a sociological phenomenon, it really is. Oftentimes, people, specifically in the manosphere, are criticized for not producing statistical results or being particularly rigorous. And I will steelman that and say, yes, there are many people in the manosphere who do that and are not particularly precise. But when we have concrete data, in this case, in the sense that the divorce rate in the Netherlands is now skyrocketing compared to previous months or previous years, simply because of a change in alimony policy, we really get some genuine insight into the motives of why people, and specifically women, are interested in marriage as a rule. And it's interesting how the mainstream, in this case the Netherlands, can simply blithely talk about this and not make reference to the psychological motivations here. And this is something I've said for a very, very long time, but marriage has always been, at least in large measure, in part, and sometimes almost completely, a kind of business deal. It's not just about love. In fact, there are many, many instances, historical instances, where this was simply a non-factor. Love, feelings, affection, etc., etc. So one would need to ask the question in the open as to why these women are rushing to file for divorce at this very strange interval of time, because the new alimony reform policy will go into effect as of the 1st of next year. You would have to be ignorant, willful or otherwise, or simply blind not to pay attention to the details of this case, which is to say, I submit to you, you gentlemen and the broader world at large, if marriage is primarily about feelings, why then would you get this radical increase in divorce within the course of a month as a response to a stimulus through government policy, i.e., you're getting a curtailment of the alimony payments by 7 years. That means thousands and thousands and thousands of euros less for the prospective woman, and I think it's clear to say what's at work here. These women were not motivated to marry because of feelings. Maybe some of them thought they were, or maybe they felt that way initially, but very, very often it's not the case, and very, very often it's clear that the marriage exists as a lifeline or form of life support And ideally, of course, I think these people, these women, would like to have lifetime alimony payments, but that's no longer possible. And now it's going to be shortened even further. So in the first place, yes, I would say this is a very clear piece of sociological data that we can use in support of certain arguments that are common in the manosphere. And I also think that it illustrates very clearly that the mainstream argument about marriage and its foundational principles is simply wrong by and large. That is more of a mirage than anything else that has been erected to confuse people, specifically men. And indeed, I think women too are confused. At the end of the day, we are all animals, men and women. And for example, there are studies that show that women orgasm more in the presence of wealth. So there's a lot of instinct involved here. Nonetheless, I think it's very clear, and if you ever have discussions with people, you can always cite this as a good piece of data, that marriage is simply a business contract at the end of the day. And another point to be made here is that something I've observed time and time again, that generally speaking, on the continent of Europe, which is to say the Netherlands, Germany, Scandinavia, etc., divorce is simply tamer than it is in the Anglosphere. There's some quality about the United States in particular, but also Canada and the rest of the Anglosphere, which has led to the aggravation of divorce proceedings, much more draconian payouts and payments, and one is left at times to wonder why that's the case. One could say these countries are much more market-driven, sort of, that might be an argument. But at the end of the day, what's happened, and this is more an observation of the after effect than what led to it in the first place, is that in these countries, divorce is typically a multi-billion-dollar industry, certainly in the United States. The lawyers have their claws in it as much as anybody else. It's not just the women. You have these lawyers pushing people, manipulating people. Of course, if you're a participant in a multi-billion-dollar industry and you're reaping the benefits of those many billions of dollars, why would you be interested in any sort of reform? On the other hand, if the approximate average of alimony payout, say in the Netherlands, is about €1,000, slightly less, the incentives there for divorce lawyers and a cooperative effect throughout the industry of divorce law, well, they're going to be minimized naturally because there's not that much to gain, and the lawyers will still be in business. Maybe there'll be some slight reduction in their efficacy and the amount of money they're making, but not to the degree it would be in the United States, where lawyers like to draw things out as long as possible. And so we cannot overlook the culpability of the legal side of things in the Anglosphere, whether it's the US, Australia, Britain, Canada, because they too play a large role. They push people's buttons, they manipulate people, and they make things on the whole a lot worse than they otherwise would be. But at the same time, it's a testament to the possibility, at least on the continent of Europe, that you might well, at some point in time, completely get rid of alimony. That is a distant, distant dream, of course. What's really illustrative here, at the end of the day, is that even for minuscule amounts, by way of comparison, say about €1,000 a month, many, many women are still incentivized to divorce their husbands, and as if by a flip of a switch, in this case, simply in response to a change in alimony policy. And I think all the world can bear witness to this. And I think all the observations with respect to this that have been made in the manosphere by various individuals and people as a whole bear this out as well. I do not think it can be denied anymore. And therefore, gentlemen, the next time this topic comes up, you can cite this. Sometimes in real life, we enter in these discussions and people are just dumbfounded or flabbergasted, incredulous. They simply won't believe you. They think you're making it up. They think you're being extremely biased. Well, if you encounter such a case, we now have very, very specific, concrete evidence to support a lot of the arguments that you've been hearing for years. And frankly speaking, I don't think they're going to be able to come up with too much counter evidence. All they might be able to say is something to the effect of primary caretaker, put years in, something, something, something. But when you get such a massive influx, such a surge, if you will, of divorce in such a short period of time, I think that belies that claim and ultimately shows you what is really going on. Or in other words, the proof is in the pudding. Gentlemen, enjoy your weekend as always. May the gods watch over you. If I'm still alive, I will check you out later. Bye-bye for now. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.